try and transport yourself to a time when there was no written word, didn't exist yet. You can say, well, are you talking about Moses writing the Pentateuch, that type of stuff? Yeah, I'm talking about there's no book. Transport yourself back, say, let's call it a couple thousand years. And now, without all the skyscrapers and without all the modern technology, you step out into the night and you look up, and what you see, if you are able to understand what is written in the sky. Now, not everybody could understand this. Some people had limited knowledge. For example, the people who were into sailing used certain stars as navigational tools to not get lost, to know their whereabouts, much like a compass. And by the way, it's still used today by most modern captains of most modern ships. They're still, even though they've got all the modern GPS, the real learned ones are still using what's in the sky as a double safety net for the technology that's in front of them. But imagine you have no information concerning anything regarding God's plan. So you look up, and if you're one of those that God has given the curiosity to try and understand, whether you are a Muslim, before there was Muslims, Bedouin, Arab wanderer, whether you are a Jew, that is a child of one of the few tribes of the children of Israel, or whether you're doesn't matter where you came from. In antiquity, not everybody was well versed in what was in the sky, but those that were, they had the ability to know certain things that seemed almost magical, like magicians, seers, savants, warriors, that type of thing. So when you approach this study, I'm asking you to do something. I'm asking you to switch gears. It's really hard. And imagine that you don't have any of this information in front of you. And when you look up that God had given you the wisdom to be able to discern what you're looking at. Remember, I'm going to be showing you diagrams that unless you know the stars within those diagrams, you wouldn't be able to complete the image. You wouldn't be able to know what it represents or the words themselves. This is what I've been telling you. Many of the names of these stars were given, let's just say, to step away from this modern idea, sometime before Christ. Most of the names were established sometime before Christ. We're talking that this type of study goes back into antiquity as a perfected art, probably to about 15 or 1600 BC that we know of. But that we don't know, that we don't have information for, I can't speculate on what we don't have the information about. So what I'm saying to you is imagine approaching this as if you had no other tools. And when you see the names involved in these stars, something has to jar your mind that it's trying to tell a message. Remember, if the stars contain the gospel, and the gospel had not yet unfolded itself, people who were looking to these signs had to put together the information, because we're talking about stars being named in the sky in Semitic tongues before events in the Bible actually took place. So that's why I'm saying to you, try and approach this as if you don't have all of the knowledge of the Bible. And imagine yourself as one of these gifted people that had the ability to look into the night sky, and you'd have to ask yourself, what do these names mean? The wounded one, the pierced one, the coming one, the fraud, the deceiver, the liar. What do these mean? And you could say, well, but all societies and cultures in antiquity had the good and the bad. Yes, this is true. But as I will keep repeating this until I can paint the complete picture of this. And then we will go through the study of looking at every single religious leader that had a prominent impact on the world. Could it be that they fit this? And we'll look at it as a panoply, putting Christ among many, a pantheon of the gods, to show only one person could fit every description of every nomenclature that has been put up there, as if to say, now if you're searching, This points to one person who is the Redeemer, the coming one. I mean, if you keep going, you're going to see these names over and over again. So as I'm telling you, imagine if you didn't have a book. And this is what I say to you. I imagine that the men who looked at the stars prior to the birth of Christ, I imagine that these men had the ability, and they did have the ability to see what I'm showing you. It's as ancient. We're talking at least minimally 2,000 to 3,000 years old as an art of study. And guess what? The beautiful thing is, unlike other things in our society that cannot be tampered with, as in revisionist history, which we've all seen happen over and over again, you can't move the stars. Now, to my listeners who are in a different stratosphere, those people who believe the earth is flat, and you don't believe a lot of what I'm saying, I'm asking you to study a little bit of history and indulge a little bit. You've got to give a little bit of leeway here. That if you're not going to grant, because I've already encountered this through several messages, look, I'm not here to tell you or study the idea of what science has already proved. My issue is, listen, for those people that believe the earth is flat, you know, when you go up in a plane, you kind of can see certain things that are not flat, but that's another sidebar. And the other things that I could talk about, if the earth was flat, we wouldn't be constantly, we'd be like a pancake. Can you imagine, like, you know, take a silver dollar and spin it, right? That's how the world would be revolving, the earth would be revolving. But anyway, let's leave that one alone. So I just gave you the background. Try to not reach too far into this book while we're mining here, because it's like trying to separate, looking at this from a pre-biblical perspective, seeing it all, and then putting it back with the Bible. And you have to do this. Whoa. I mean, it is that jarring. I don't care what you think, but after a while, and you realize, wow, these are some really old, this is old studies. This is not something new. It's not a new revelation. So we're talking about the 12 zodiac signs and the signs that go with the 12 zodiac signs to the north or the south. The term for that, to the north or the south, the stars that appear to the north or the south are decans. So to the north or to the south of the main, we'll call it, in this case, for example, we looked at last week, Virgo, or 2 weeks ago, we looked at Virgo. And did I put this the right way? There she is. Okay, so there's Virgo, the Virgin. And then within, to the north and the south, you've got Coma, which is the mother and child. Both is the coming one. So you get an idea of looking around to see what we're dealing with around the main figure. That provides you with the concept of the entire, we'll call it a constellation or a cluster, okay? So we started with Virgo, the Virgin, prostrate with distinct possessions in hand, which we covered. The Bote is known as the coming one. Now, I should point this out. Let's see if I have a picture here, and I do. And so what's important, because you might be saying, well, where am I getting these terms? Let's take this away for a minute. If you look carefully, you're going to see letters within the image. Some of those are accompanied with brighter stars. So you've got the stars being named. Some of these you can look up and they have names attached to them, all right? And those are usually either, the vast majority of those names are either Arabic or of Hebrew origin. Now, some of them are not, but the main important thing is for some of you saying, okay, I'm trying to follow you. These images, if you start looking them up, you'll find that the stars related inside are all identified by certain names, which I have been trying to share with you. Botes, for example, underneath his name should be the coming one, but inside, the stars inside Botes even give more impact to the name. The coming one, which we just covered, Coma, mother and child, which, as I've said before, in almost every culture, you've got a mother and child concept. The only problem we have here is if we were going to take, for example, Osiris, Osiris could not fit all of the different names that are being attached. The whole zodiac, if you will, tells a story. It's the whole gospel story. So if you're following it from Virgo, the Virgin, all the way around with all of its north and south, it can only apply to one person. And I will show that to you later. I'm trying to just kind of do a review. We looked at Centaurus, the dual nature of Christ, and beneath Centaurus, the cross. I always have to make sure it's like, which way are we going? All right, here we are. So there is Virgo, the Virgin, Coma, Bootes, and then we've got Centaur, the dual nature, the cross underneath, the crux cross, the dying victim. We covered those so far. And I explained to you that the dying victim, if you look it up in the older charts, it will be a sheep or a lamb, not a wolf. Then we move to Libra, and the balance is there. And I'm going to see if I've got it's not a great image, and it's kind of hard to see. So here is Libra right here. Does not look like the standard picture of weights, but if you take a look here, the two spheres, that would be up and down, and then a crossbar in between. And then the letters give you also additional names of stars, plus these. So it's first, second, third in their value, if you will, appear. They're calling them first magnitude, second magnitude, third magnitude, and so on. All right, we also looked at the crown, the corona borealis. And I keep moving this thing. Like, whee! All right, so here we go. There is the crown. And as I showed you, the serpents going up to usurp the crown. Now, all of this imagery, some of it is very typical of antiquity. If you were a person who studied strange drawings in antiquity, there was a strange fascination with snakes and dragons and all kinds of stuff. In fact, some of the works perfected in a certain period of time are highly sought after. They're called something that looks like bestiaries. It's books of drawings of certain images that people thought existed. You know, half man, half snake, or whatever that was. It was a popular theme. So almost every culture has serpents and dragons. If you look, for example, at the Chinese, the Japanese, serpents, dragons, their art is replete with it. But don't think they're the only ones, because the Greeks and the Romans, they did the same thing. So it's kind of an image that will appear everywhere. In fact, the symbol of the tribe of Dan, serpent, right? So it's everywhere. Okay, so we saw the serpent trying to obtain the crown. Then we looked at Scorpio, serpents, the serpent, Ophiuchus, the serpent holder, Hercules, the mighty one representing great strength and wisdom. Sagittarius, I believe, is where we left off last week, the archer, the lyra or the harp, representing worship and praise, the altar, a burning pyre, and Draco, the dragon. Let's take a look and see where we find these things. So there is the pyre or the altar. Here we see Sagittarius. So you've and there's the lyra. All right, so a couple of things I want to talk about with these images, and then we'll move on. So the altar, ara, or pyre, the Arabics call this al-mugamra, meaning the completing, the finishing, the making an end of what was the goal. The Greeks called it ara, a word that in Latin denoted an elevated area of stone or wood, etc., for sacred purposes, for burning sacrifice or sacrifices offered to the gods, so hence an altar. So why is that important? Every culture, almost every culture in antiquity had some type of altar. Again, when you start putting all of these pieces together, it's all of the information together, because some of these in isolation, it's like, well, what's the big deal? The harp, or not the harp, what are we looking at here? Right here. The harp is winged, right, with the head looking in that direction. And all I want to say about this is this musical instrument, again, you can see abundantly in, for example, Greek artwork in antiquity. The harp was a big part of whatever they were depicting. Music was either sports with nudity and harps. That's the thing that the Greeks seem to like, right? Okay. Yay, we love Greece. All right. So my point there is the harp is usually attached to praise, worship, but as I said, that's a very generic concept. So until we put it in the whole picture, you might just say, well, it's just a musical instrument that could be used for worship and praise, but it doesn't necessarily say so. Finally, last but not least, we're looking at Draco, the dragon. And I want to show you something, the serpent. I want to show you something very interesting. So there are stars within this Draco, the dragon, snake, whatever you want to call him. It does look like a dragon's mouth with the tongue sticking out. But I want you to notice something. It is at the center of everything, which is pretty interesting because we tend to lessen or mitigate the prince of the power of the air, the demonic forces, but that's at the center of everything. And I want you to think carefully about this because Christ is at the center of everything for us. And there's a paradox. The minute Christ becomes the center of everything for you, you become the interest of the devil. And the whole idea of like the world trying to usurp you out of the grip, which again is part and parcel of the depiction of the dragon. So, as I said, it's fascinating to me that so many cultures have this object venerated and worshipped, but there are so many similar images. So we've got here Draco at the center, and I think I tried to point this out to you. You've got other snake-like creatures. Here is Hydra, another one. So kind of just in here again, the serpent holder. So the idea is, I think, peppered in, we almost have this inextricable battle along the way. The whole cycle is replete with the devil trying to go, like, he photobombs everything. If you can get that one, it's like, here I am in church, right? He's in the background going, right? That's what that is. Okay, now you got that image. I don't have to. Yeah, Pastor, you got away with words. Okay. So the name of this constellation, Draco, the dragon, the trodden down one in Arabic, El Wa'id, the one who is to be destroyed. Again, if you're trying not to go with the Bible, but how do you kind of stay away, listen to all this, and not make the connection? I don't know. Second star in this constellation is Rastaban, the head of the subtle, and this third star, Etanin, the long serpent, the dragon, the deceiver. Here, another name, El Athik, the fraudulent one. So we get a clear picture. Many names are given to this image. And it's always the same thing. You don't hear the one who is saving, the one who is delivering, the one who is doing good. It's the usurper, the fraudulent one, the one who will be wounded, the one who will be ended. Kind of interesting if you're going for these parallels. Okay, we're going to move on because I have to get through this to at least give all the basic stuff here. We're going to move on to Capricorn or Capricornus, which again is kind of interesting as we move through. If you see, we've got the head of a goat or ram and the tail of a fish. And this is very interesting because there's going to be a very similar half and half image to this elsewhere that we're going to deal with. So know that this one, the goat actually is heading downward with head down, almost like it is falling, and the tail is swirled and up. All right, a conjoined image, goat and fish. What a combination. So I want you to think of it like this. The idea is that through the concept of one being sacrificed, something else might live. The conjoined image there really will become a little bit more revealed. I need to tell you about another conjoined image. So just kind of save that one for right now. The reason why I say to you it's important to study the goat, for example, in the Bible, is an animal that would be used for sacrifice. If you read Leviticus, the book of Leviticus 9. So we read in that passage that Aaron took the goat, which was a sin offering for the people, slew it, offered an offering for sin. Here the imagery of a goat in the motion downward is falling. So let's look at the Arabic names associated with this sign. Gedi and Dabi. These carry the meaning of cut off, slain sacrifice, and ultimately the sign itself, Capricornus, Capricorn, from the Latin, not only goat, but bow down in death or atonement. I don't know how you get there from that. If we look at the image, as I said, it's conjoined, goat and fish. So try and kind of think of the concept of out of one thing, life is going to come. Now, it'll be seen, as I say, as we move into another constellation, so I'm going to keep moving on. We see the pierced eagle. So here we are. Capricorn is here, and we should see the eagle is right there. If you can see, it says Aquila, and there are a couple of stars in there, and the names are actually on there. They're very hard to read, but they're actually on there. So, the pierced eagle, second decan, constellation of Aquila. Inside the eagle, the stars, the wounded one, or the falling eagle, El Tayir in the Arabic, the wounded one. Okay, the second star in that eagle is the scarlet covered or blood covered. You're going to be looking at this before any sacrifice of any person was ever made. Maybe you'd be saying, oh, okay, well, this is an image of sacrifice. But as you keep adding the layers, it becomes almost like, how do you make this up? And if you remember, a lot of people will argue and say, oh, the eagle's not biblical. What? What are you talking about? We've got a couple of passages, the most famous one where I believe it's in Deuteronomy, where I bear you on the wings of eagles, right? That carried you there myself, or all the way that the Lord did lead them. And he's saying as if they were mounted up on eagle's wings, the majestic bird. So no, it's a biblical concept. And then there's one more sign in this constellation. So here we have the eagle headed down, and the delphinus, that is Greek for dolphin, right there. Happy little fellow with a lot of stars inside, right? And you're like, yeah, I'm getting away from that darn eagle. All right. If we connect this image, that of the dolphin, see, it's like piecemeal. So if you connect the image of the dolphin to the dying goat, because they're all connected, every cluster or constellation is connected. You almost have to tell the story within each constellation. The dolphin itself, there's an image of when you see dolphins. You know, dolphins almost, most people when they see dolphins, they get happy, right? There's some kind of, positive response. But dolphins typically, they're coming out of the water and they're going back in the water. And the symbolism there would be something like the dolphin coming out of the watery grave. It's a picture, in this case, of resurrection or the resurrected life, of something coming out of the water. We've got, obviously, its position is not face down. It's kind of in a sideways. So this is what's interesting. In ancient mythology, the dolphin was a sacred species. And the ancient interpretations of the constellations, it was sacred to Apollo because he slew the dragon. Again, if you start looking at this and you say, well, mythology has a kernel of truth in it somewhere, then you're seeing what I'm seeing, which is here we've got an image of death basically being conquered. But it's a big stretch. If you're looking at it isolated, when you step away and you see it all, it's not a big stretch. So we can sum up Capricornus or Capricorn by saying this sign covers much of the gospel in the myriad ways of looking at this sign from the emergence of the church. Why do I say that? Because this image right here of the sacrifice being made so that, and we'll see it again in another place too, but where there is life coming out of something that must die, kind of just like the church. So, obviously, as I said, the dolphin revealing the resurrected life, the eagle's ability to rush both to protect and also to defend. It's almost like saying that image tells you a complete picture of everything that we would need to know within that constellation as pertaining to the work of Christ. But it's not finished because it keeps going. If we move to the sign of Aquarius, and this is where it starts, you're going to start seeing the symbolism making more sense. The sign of Aquarius is down here, and I want you to see there's a picture of a man holding an urn, and out of the urn looks like there's water flowing, and here is a fish kind of going towards the water. But take a good look at the man, because this arm is over the goat, kind of in front of the goat. This arm we really don't see, so he's obviously holding this. And there's a very clear interpretation based on the stars that are inside that image. So it's kind of, I'd say it this way, it's the names in there, we get some interesting, I'm just going to explain it this way, it's going to be much easier. This urn of water being poured out and into the fish's mouth, really we have here almost what would be the picture of the church, the water being poured out. Come unto me, whosoever drinks of this water shall not thirst. You've got the fish coming to the water. There's a progression here from what died and life that's coming out of it to feeding or going into the stream of this water that is flowing out from this man. You might say, wow, that's quite a stretch. But again, the stars inside there tell a story. So if we're going to speed things along here, I'm just going to say we definitely have the capacity to see not a stretch, almost like the gospel unfolding. And if you keep moving, you're going to see here Pegasus. I got to turn again so you can see Pegasus in the right angle. Pegasus is up here, this winged horse. And again, everything is either going upside down or right side, but it's in a circle. So I want you to see the bright star in Pegasus. And now I'm going to turn it back again, upside down. All right. So, in this image, we have Pega or Pasha, the Pegasus, also known as the horse of the gushing fountain. The winged horse is unknown in nature, but is a figure of him who is the branch who, under the sign of Aquarius, pours forth his blessing upon the fish. The image of fish is ancient in Christendom. Before there was this idea of Christianity being widely propagated, people were gathering in places, and the code for knowing that you were amongst fellow believers was the sign of the fish being carved somewhere. That was the sign Christians are gathering there, the sign of fish. Why fish? Again, everything can be corrupted. The pagans say, well, fish, fish eggs, just like the Easter bunny, right? But we are supposed to be that abundant. In fact, there's a scripture, I believe, where Jacob is blessing Joseph's children, and he says something to the effect of to go and be prosperous. And if you look in the margin, it says, like fish in the Hebrew, like as if to say, go out there and do what they do, right? Eggs, I don't know. All right, we'll leave that to the birds and the bees people who maybe more savvy than I am there. All right, so in ancient names, this stars, Markab, the returning one, Enif, the branch, Human, the waters, Matar, the one who causes the increase or overflow. Finally, within this cluster of imagery, we have, last but not least, the swan. Where is the swan? All right, so here is the swan. And kind of interesting because, again, I'm trying to give you all of the designations that when we step back, we can have the clearer picture. The image, like others, is a repetition or reminder reinforcing the concept this bird is here not falling to its death, but flying through the heavens, headed to earth its brightest star between its head and its tail is called Deneb, meaning judge. I don't know how you make these things up, but okay. We're moving quickly through to the sign of Pisces. Remember, I said I'm going to try and get this all out, and then we can microanalyze. We can go back. That may be the better way to do this. So here we're moving to Pisces. And I want you to see right here, again, another fish. And we're going to be looking at this whole cluster over here. Another fish image. Again, all of these, you might say, what, there's a lot of fish, a lot of half man, half horse, and a lot of snakes. Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. Okay. So, actually, I'm thinking I did not describe this right to you. Okay, I want you to take a really good look because I did just miss something here. This fish right here and this fish right here are actually, they're both tethered at the tail. See right here and right here. Now take a look at the band or the ribbon is sitting, the ram or Aries has its leg between the two, okay? So if you can see the animal's leg, Aries' leg, separating the two fish, but they're both tethered. So they're not free to swim around the heavens. I don't know if that even makes sense, but whatever. All right. Now it's getting weird. All right. So the ends are fastened separately by their tails. The Hebrew name here, you're going to maybe recognize it, Dagim. You should be familiar with this if you remember from the Bible. Dagon, the fish god, right? Dagim. Oddly enough, this is what I was saying. It's this word when Jacob was blessing Joseph's sons, and he said, let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Some Bibles, I checked this out, the margins, let them grow as fishes do increase. So let them just go crazy and make babies and be prosperous, I guess. All right, there's another way of understanding God's desire for his creation to go forth and multiply. The Syriac calls this nuno, the fish, prolong, carrying the idea of prosperity into successive generations or continuance. The sign is a pictorial representation of the church. So combined with the water being poured out and the fish going into the water, these are all symbols you would find in the book. And remember, this is not exact. There's no, if it matched up perfectly to everything in the Bible, I would be highly suspicious. Like, what type of fraud is this? But it's enough, we'll call it in the abstract and some that close in precision that you have to give a second look. In the zodiac of Dendera, this sign is referred to as Pico, Orion, fishes of him that cometh, or the fishes of the coming one. Okay, again, I don't know how you want to interpret this, but could that be the coming one as in Krishna? The coming one Osiris? The coming one Muhammad? The coming one Moses? Nah, all right. Silencio. All right. All right, so we need to return to the verbiage of the Bible and the reason why there is the seed, the offspring. And if you're kind of going, we started with seed of the woman, and the seed of the woman that will bruise the serpent's head, but the seed of the woman is also going to be multiplying and prosperous in the earth. So we have this in the scripture. The Lord shall increase you more and more. You and your children, you are blessed of the Lord. They are the seed of the Blessed One, and their offspring with them. I will multiply you upon men. So the concept of being blessed and multiplying or being fruitful is even seen here in the stars. The first decan of this long ribbon, in its ancient name, is Arisha, the band or the bridle. The two fishes must be looked at carefully to understand the meaning of their being bound. They are, as I said, caught, not free, in the sense that there may be other fishes. We don't see them here swimming around, although there are some. But think of these more as tethered to God. And the reason why I say tethered to God, is because when we get into the symbol of Aries, Aries is the picture of the lamb or the ram of God. Not image of God, but symbolically. On one of the caught fish's head, or is headed in the direction of, and this is what, I have to kind of do this real carefully. One of the fishes is headed in the direction of Andromeda. Right here is Andromeda. And if you look carefully at Andromeda, let's turn Andromeda this way. Andromeda seems to have chains and is bound, but not bound to anything. The chains are just there. You can see both the feet and the wrists. And the fish is swimming that way. Now, I have to explain this carefully because there's a lot of folks that are super sensitive to certain things. So I want to make sure no one takes something as a sexist comment, because that's what people tend to do. Andromeda is a picture of the church, and I'll explain why. Because the church is often referred to as her, or the bride of Christ. In the mythological understanding, Andromeda was the ruler of men. She ruled over men. But if we are understanding the signs through the lens of the Bible, she is the church, and she is what is over the church. And her chains, remember, they are not bound to anything. They're free-floating. I want you to think of now, go back to the Bible. I hate to do this, but I have to. I want you to think of Paul. When he wrote in the Greek, Paulos doulos, slave or servant of Christ, the imagery comes to someone who is bound. So we have here the chained, the afflicted, the broken down, all right? Then we move to the sign of Aries because I have to bring this in to tie this together. And I know I won't finish this sign, but I at least can, I'm trying to get all this in because then I want to go back and I want to peel this apart a little bit deeper, because what I'm doing right now is just identifying things for you on the map. So on the figure of a ram, the ram carries with it the meaning of high, elevated, or lifted up. And remember, we saw the fish. I keep moving things. Here is Aries, right here. So you've got the certain stars, if you can see them, the leg that is between the fish that are bound, all right? And also, I just want to put a little footnote. Important to note that the ram, both Aries and Taurus, fit into a certain category, the horns of power. There's just certain things that go with this. In Syriac, Amru, the lamb, the same as what John said, behold, the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. In Arabic, Al-Hamal, the gentle or merciful one. So this animal is full of life. The ram, the lamb, whatever you want to call it, full of life, not dying. In each sign that I have named, with the more notable stars within each sign, for example, in this sign of Aries, you've got 66 stars within it. So in terms of Virgo, it has so many stars. I'll go back and give this information because once, as I said, I've painted the gestalt. We can go back and kind of take a deeper dive. The chief star, which looks like it is on the forehead, is named El Nath. See if we can see it on the forehead, right there. El Nath. I'm not sure if you can see it because really the writing's very small, but you could probably see the star above the eye. So El Nath. All right. El Nath is the wounded or slain one. There is another star in the left horn called El Sheratin, the bruised or wounded one. So this imagery, I'm telling you, you now start thinking of the Bible. John writing things like, worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory. And you kind of think, I don't know, okay, if you look too hard at the symbols, you'll say, well, I don't see the connection. But if you're listening to what's in the symbols by the words of the stars that were named within each constellation, I don't know what you do with that. That's telling you the story. And as I said, I don't see it fitting Muhammad. I don't see it fitting Moses. I don't see it fitting Krishna. I see only one that can take all of these titles to himself. Before he even was incarnate, the story is being unfolded in the stars. Strange coincidence? I don't know, all right? But we know that For example, Herodotus wrote about this, that ancient Egyptians would kill a ram at the entrance of the sun into Aries. During the festival of Ammon, Jupiter, branches were placed over doors and the ram carried and displayed in a procession. The sun enters Aries on the 14th of Nisan. Do you know that date? It's the date of Passover. And another lamb was ordered to be slain, even as the Lord's Passover, due to the precession of the equinoxes. The sun at the time of the Exodus had dipped into Aries, marking the spring equinox. So again, if you really are going to take a deep dive, you could take all this information. Now, here's the stuff that's going to drive people crazy. You take all of this information, and then you go to look at all the almanacs marking every incident in the sky, and you will actually be able, with clarity, there's a lot of ambiguity and there's a lot of confusion, you'll be able to find the date and the timing of Christ's birth just based on this information. If you weren't using what I've showed you out of the courses of the priest, out of Luke's gospel telling about John the Baptist's father serving, if you didn't have that, you could do it from the stars. That's pretty mind-boggling right there. And by the way, it's not like maybe some people say, oh, well, maybe when they were scribing, they made an error and they just perpetuated it. Not in the stars, buddy. Not in the stars. It is written in the stars, all right? So, when Christ was crucified, though, this is the part that connects to this. When Christ was crucified, the sun receded, marking the very spot of the stars El Nath, the wounded one, and El Sheratan, the bruised one. So, coincidence, maybe? I'll let you decide on that one. All right, yeah, because I just said a mouthful. I mean, I don't know how you make certain things align perfectly and then say, it's just a coincidence when you have a couple dozen coincidences. I don't know. All right, we're looking at another sign within this constellation right here, Cassiopeia. And if you look carefully, it's hard to really see what the image is. But this enthroned woman, El Seder in Arabic, meaning the freed, or the Hebrew El Shedar or Shedar, after sharing the same as the Arabic, the freed one. You have a smaller star closest to the arm of the chair, Kaf, meaning the branch, given on account of the branch of victory in her hand, seated in the Arctic Circle close to the side of King Cephas. So take a look at this, because I said the image is very small. So if you can see that image right there. But what's important, I want you to see who she is beside, this Cephas. And there are a couple of stars in his body with names. And again, this looks like he's got some type of a cloth draped around his shoulder and some type of torch of some means right beside. So there are two things to look at here, two more things to look at. As I said, the one is the enthroned woman, but Cassiopeia or Cassiopeia, often represented as the mother of Andromeda, like the Apostle Paul referring to the church as the mother of us all, as well as the New Jerusalem. So again, looking at that, you might say, well, how does that work? But again, I have to paint the whole picture to come back to that. So we know that Christ is to have a church presented to him, a glorious church without spot or wrinkle. And that concept that there is a governing body above what is basically representing the church. So Cassiopeia is an enthroned queen, literally a picture of the church as it enters its glory. And when I say that, it's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, I can see the image, but they're sitting on chairs or thrones of some kind. So I don't think it's an accident when you make the connection. The thrones that John saw, many times the thrones that are mentioned in the Bible, the concept of kingly rule and those that will rule with the king. Cetus, who sits to the south of Aries, funny-looking head, big head, paws that look like dog paws, and again, with a fishtail. Again, another confusing image, right? Seems like another half and half. So this one, the creature has a huge head, mouth, front paws, but you can't see it here. It also has scales. And in some of the ancient writings, it is called the whale, but the zodiac of Dendera, its name is Nu, or Nim, sorry, which means subdued. I would like you to say this about 12 times, and people are like, yeah, what's wrong with you? The star which sits right around the nose or the mandible area, called Menkar, is to mean bound or chained enemy. And the star in the flank of the tail area is called Difta or Deneb, the overthrown. The star on its shoulder, Mira, the rebel. So if you look carefully, there's always an imitation of something. Remember I said to you, we've got half man, half horse, symbolizing a dual nature. We have another dual-natured creature here, but instead of it being the image of something that is being transitioned like the goat to the fish, because out of death comes life, this is just almost like a copycat, a wannabe duplicate of a half and half, if you will, but it has more connections to Satan, the devil, the adversary, than anything else. We read many times over, and again, taking from the Bible, an overview, the enthroned Lamb will punish Leviathan. So if you want to look at that and say, is that what Job saw when he described Leviathan? We always think of, it must be the dinosaurs that we modernly know, but we don't know what these animals or these beasts were. So could this be the Leviathan of Job or of Isaiah? Who knows? But we do know this. There are many different places in the Bible where we read of the ultimate doom, the ultimate fate. So I would say to you, the person or the one who presents himself as a dual nature, as the copycat, will meet his fate. To the north, Perseus, known as the breaker, delivering the redeemed. So let's look here, right here. Got a giant machete-like thing in one hand, over his head, a helmet. Take a look at what is over here. It's kind of hard to make out. And he's got wings on his feet or his ankles right there, Perseus. Known as, again, as I said, the breaker delivering his redeemed. This, if you take this word from the Hebrew, it is the same word the prophet Micah used where he says, he shall surely gather the remnant of Israel. It is written, the breaker is gone up before them. That's the word being used out of Micah. Same word, Peretz, or Perseus. So he breaks down every barrier. He also breaks the head of Leviathan and his hosts. Now I want you to take a look. It's not clear where this arm is swinging, but it's certainly not in the motion of being put up. It's not swinging towards Andromeda. It's not swinging towards Cassiopeia. So it's swinging somewhere on a downward angle. We'll probably have to readdress this in another message. So, but the right hand, a great sword, hand of power, lifted up in action as if to smite or stop the enemy. He bears wings around his ankles, which tells you he moves with swiftness. His left hand, it's hard to see there, is the head of his enemy, who has victoriously been put down. In Greek mythology, it says that this was the head of Medusa, being ignorant of what this is called in Hebrew, sometimes called, wait for it, Rosh Shatan. If you know Hebrew, Resh is head or front. Shatan, Satan, the head of Satan. Now, I don't know how you could name a star in the head of a head and call it the head of Satan. But if you want to know from the Arabic, El Gaul, the head of the evil spirit. So let me wrap this up by looking at a few stars that are within Perseus. In his waist, there is a star called Mirfak, the one who helps. And the star in his right shoulder, El Ganib, the one who carries away. And the bright star in his foot, Athik, the one who breaks. So somebody's listening out there and says, well, how does any of this that you just spent the last, say, almost hour, how does any of this prove that Christ lived? Well, let me finish unfolding the whole zodiac. And when you go through each and every one of these, analyzing each of the stars contained in each constellation of each sign, including the north and the south decans and everything that's encompassed around it, and you take that deep dive, as I said, it is not talking about any mythological person. It is not talking about and cannot be addressing any other person in history, because every single concept in here is really a different word, a different synonym, if you want to call it that way, to describe the Redeemer, the one who is all power, the one who is almighty, the one who was wounded for our transgressions. He is indeed the victim. He is the offering. He is the sacrifice. You can keep going. He's the one that's going to bruise Satan's head with his heel. You keep seeing all of these names. Then you see all these different names for the devil. The devil who comes as an angel of light. The devil who is the accuser of the brethren. All of the different names, and you'll find all of these names are somehow floating in here in this zodiac. And you might say, well, okay, what did the ancients know? That's a darn good question, but I guarantee you something. Some of them knew more than we know. Some of them who didn't have a book looked into the sky and said there will be a child born of a virgin, Virgo the virgin. There will be a child born. That child will be nurtured in the hands of the mother. He will grow up, Butes, the coming one, the Redeemer. And as you move through that, each and every one of these is telling you the unfolding drama that all points to God sending his only begotten Son to die for our sins, to battle the forces of evil, to put down, eventually to put down Satan. And you might say, well, I still don't see, I see all of these kind of similarities. But as I said, when you see the 12 signs and all of the north and the south that's clearly put out there, you have a problem, because no other, as I said, mythological figure or no other person in religious history, in the stage of human history, could take all of those names and make them fit, not forced. They fit neatly over the Bible, and all of the names for the devil, the conqueror, the devourer, Satan, the evil one, the evil-spirited one, they all fit him. And you might say, okay, well, could there be another explanation? No. Sorry to say it like that, but that's just it. Now, if you believe in coincidences, if you're the person that says, well, you know, this is just a bunch of coincidences, wait until I'm done, and we look at and we tell the whole gospel story. And at some point you're going to say, only one thing is possible. God wrote this in the sky so that we who are warped, sinful, delusional, could never alter or rewrite what God intended us to know in this book. And thank God there's not too much of a distance. It's the language that, if anything, has tainted our ability to clearly understand. But remarkably, when you look at the stars and you analyze them and you look back at the Bible, these two things agree and mesh together. And as I said, it's symbolism. Don't look at that and say, well, I just don't see the picture of Christ there. You're not going to. You're going to see the Gospels written in the stars as God wanted us to understand them. And the symbols themselves, by the way, some of them, as I said, it's a stretch, but when you start looking deeply, like I said, what's the purpose of putting a dolphin, for example, except if you understand the dolphin's behavior to, we'll say, do what dolphins do, but when they come up, it seems like in that brief moment as they come and breach the water just before they hit the water again, we know that underneath the water is teeming with life, but we use that imagery, for example, as a watery grave, coming up out of the watery grave to represent the resurrected life. So even something like the dolphin, which Greek mythology would say, well, it's representing something else. Tell me, what is it representing? What was the point of it being identified as such? If you can give me another reason, if you can give me another explanation, I'll listen. But in the big picture, it only fits one way. And you say, well, okay, I'll wait to see the end of this. I'm still not sure. Well, then be patient. Come along with me on this ride. And hopefully when I'm done, two things will happen. You'll say, my faith is strengthened. I didn't need to have this strengthening, but it's strengthened knowing that this is not just when somebody says, oh, are the Gospels reliable? You know what baffles me? We have more fragments that are old not extant articles, but we've got more old fragments dating so close to, we'll call it a window of 50 to 100 years of the time of Christ, fragments. And they're in abundance. We've got things like the shroud. We've got a lot of different things. And yet, for some people, there'll never be enough proof. There'll never be enough of anything. You could show them, here, this is what Jesus looked like. I'm not saying that we know. The shroud is we'll say an approximate, or maybe it's exact, I don't know. But somebody's saying, here, look, they'd say, I still don't believe you. I still can't believe that. Or here's the evidence. Here, this is tangible. I still don't believe it. That must be made up. So for those people who are asking for more, you're never going to be satisfied. But for the people who say, you know what, I'm going to open the door a little bit and I'm going to indulge myself to the curiosity of this subject, I think you'll be very surprised at the end. At first it sounds like a little crazy tangent, but as you see these things unfolding, make no mistake, the Arabs and the Jews that put those names in the sky were definitely motivated by one source, and that is God, to name certain things that then hundreds of years later would come to symbolize what hundreds of years later would be written. That hundreds of years later we'd be standing here looking at both and saying, it's a testament that these things confirm what we're reading in this book. Now, don't put all your weight on this subject, on this study. Wait for all the other pieces to come in before you make your conclusions and come to some, I had an epiphany, but wait for it. And in the process, I think this journey proves something else. If you're really looking, you can find, we'll call them interesting ways to support this book, but there's never going to be anything to replace what's in this book. This is our roadmap. I'm just showing you how to approach the subject in a very different light. So I hope you will be along for the next installment, but for today, that's my message. I'm Pastor Melissa Scott, pastor of Faith Center, Glendale, California. I teach every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. If you'd like to attend services with us, simply call the 800 number, that is 800-338-3030, to join us. If you'd like to watch, listen, and learn 24 hours a day, simply log on to our website at www.pastormelissascott.com.